Hello, dear listeners. Today, within the framework of Porta, we are going to have a lecture on China's presence in Europe and what challenges we might face or we are facing at the moment in regards of this China's presence in Europe or China's relations with European Union. And before to start to give quite concrete examples, I would like to reflect a bit on democracy and what situation we have at the moment. So I should say that these are quite hard times for liberal democracy. After the fall of Berlin Wall or after the collapse of Soviet Union, the overall mood in West was very optimistic, and theorists as well as policy practitioners, including those who were dealing with European integration issues, thought that we have such a good situation that kind of democratic global wave is optimal and inventable. But the reality we are facing today demonstrates that after decades of democratic backsliding, the optimism was without any good or solid grounds. And the same we can say about the West or including Europeans' perception on the Chinese Communist Party or the ways how China will develop within the country itself and how China will interact with the rest of the world. And I should say that during that period, supporters of democratization theories and supporters of engagement policies thought that by interacting with China's political elite and interacting with China's society, enhancing economic ties and political commitments via international agreement, that this kind of set of democratic engagements or set of engagements with democratic regimes and coupling them with a stronger middle class and the pursuit of rule of law in the country, China eventually could become democratic and free. It has not happened. On the contrary, China moved to the world. China moved world itself or global arena to much more autocratic system, and that's why certain researchers are claiming that Western democracies, with their wishful thinking or kind of few optimistic views for the democratic future, actually led to a rise of authoritarianism and the decline of democracy. And we can see this in several researches which demonstrate the overall situation in the world. Like, for example, in 2020, I remember it was time of COVID, right? And China's influence was widely discussed, and China's role in spread of COVID. So during that time, Varieties of Democracy report found that 2020 was the first time since 2001 that the world was more autocratic, had more autocratic institutions than democratic ones. And one can mention 24th of February last year, 24th of February 2022, when Russia, which is autocracy, electoral autocracy, invaded exactly that day in electoral democracy Ukraine. Exactly then came out another report, which was what an interesting coincidence, right? So that day, We Dem Institute published annual review of the global state of democracy. And the picture which was shown in this report was not optimistic at all. So the level of democracy enjoyed by average global citizen, report said that it was down to 1989 levels. 30 years of democratic advance was without. Dictatorships were on the rise, and they are still on the rise. And they harbor 70% of the world population, 5.4 billion people. 26% of the world population live in closed autocracies, and electoral autocracy was the most common regime type and harbors 44% of world population. So you see that it looks really pessimistic for Europe and West in general, the part of the world which stands for liberal democracy. And especially important in context of Europe, it is in terms of normative power. I mean, with this, that the European Union sees itself as a normative power. It interacts in the world as a normative power. And as a result, we see that in this sense, we can say that Europe has lost some fights for people's thoughts, but also it means that this type of situation threatens not only the future of democracy in our whole world, but there are certain challenges for Europe in this context itself. So in order to try to better understand what might be China's role in Europe, I would like to start with giving some insight in foreign policy of China and like in the understanding of Chinese political elite. What are foreign policy aims and how China sees interaction with other parts of the world, including Europe. So in this sense, we can say that in recent years, China has made several kind of dramatic or important foreign policy decisions, which have changed China's self-identification, its vision on international, on its role in the international system, and it has, of course, influenced the international system and global as well as regional context. And it means that in this sense, China's view, which is changing, also has influenced let's say, in the ways how other countries interact with, not only with China, but between themselves, etc. So it means that China's economic influence, which is increasing, as well as military might, which is increasing, together in a mix with the political regime in China, which is far more active in global arena, it gives an opportunity for Beijing to speak about the changing role of presence in global affairs. As a result, we see very particular results already in other regions of the world. Like, for example, in Middle East, China has managed to become the power which made Middle East countries to review their interactions between themselves and to try to find more peaceful situation. Similar demonstrations we see at the moment in context of war in Ukraine, but so far, while we don't see the concrete results, we can see just certain initiatives which China have. But I think we will see some more, not only initiatives, but results quite soon. And so if we go further, in order to understand how China interacts with the world, we should remember that let's say the Chinese Communist Party influence or the way how decisions are made in Chinese Communist Party is the core key to understand how the foreign policy decisions are being made. And in this sense, we should remember that there, despite the fact that country is a really big, the core foreign policy decisions are made by very small group of people who are very close to Xi Jinping. And this group of people, is the core of Communist Party and core of decision-making processes, both internal and external. So, this narrow group of Communist Party people are responsible for formulating foreign policy, but also there are some other actors which I need to mention. And I would like to mention also that state-controlled, state-funded think tanks also are involved in the way how the formulation of foreign policy is being made. On another hand, I wouldn't kind of overvalue the role of think tanks. They are still subordinated to the Communist Party. And here I can give you a very particular example when it comes to Russia's war in Ukraine. Let's say quite big part of state-funded think tanks. The think tank has said that, to be very frank, that messing with Russia is not in China's interest, but taking account that presidency and his this narrow circle of people, they have other specific view sometimes China on Russia, so we see a bit different results than things are recommending. But still, it is important to understand that this is the think tankers are helping to formulate China's foreign policy. At the same time, we should understand that, taking account that there is this narrow group of people, including think tankers, who are kind of percepting world and reflecting to it with particular foreign policies. This way of thinking this group has is very different from, like, for example, Western American or European way of thinking. First of all, we should remember that Chinese are not, although they are calculating in short term also, the basis is indeed in calculations in a long term. That's why there is this compromission that basically if Westerners are thinking mainly in short or middle term, then Chinese are thinking in terms of centuries. And for this reason, it is important to remember that although sometimes we don't see a sense of certain policies or certain action China does, probably it is in connection with its kind of long-term vision. Also, we should remember that the basic thesis of Chinese worldviews are supporting deepening of globalization and multiculturalism. But in this sense, multiculturalism does not always mean support for diversity in a way that all diverse groups have equal rights. There is a bit different, more nuanced approach, which I will explain a bit later. But what is important also to mention is that China sees world as or world order as the one which should be changed, and that the Western dominated world order should be changed. And China sees itself as a leader of these changes. And China sees itself as a normative power in this sense, the one which has a right to set the new rules. In order to go further, so also with this thinking about the right to set the new rules for world order, Chinese think tankers and decision makers believe that China understands and knows world better than the rest of the world understands China. And this group of people think that at a certain moment China went to learn to West and other parts of the world in order to learn from other parts of the world, or to learn what has been done in science, in research, etc. Now they believe that it's time to other parts of the world to learn from China. On another hand, my personal view is that what Chinese elite has not understood is that more hard and more nuanced work should be done if China wants to sell more effectively its ideas. And probably thanks God that Chinese elite has not kind of developed these skills that good yet. So also, although China is talking in its main discourse about win-win situation, we should understand that the Chinese interpretation of win-win is slightly different from the one which is popular in the West, because in China it means that the stronger ones, in this case great powers, has natural right to win more than middle powers or small powers. And this should be important signal for European countries, and not only to them. Also, take in account the historical self-perception for this elite. It is natural to think that one country is in the center, and this country is China. This is kind of sinocentric approach. And also, it should be mentioned that the clear difference between Western perception of relations between state power and individuals or community and parts of community, either individuals within state or states with in relations with the global picture or global system. So the community will be always more important than individual ones. And the leaders of those communities are those big ones and strong ones, not the small ones. So while we are speaking about Chinese perception of equal rights, the equality has been understood in other means than we usually understand in democracies. So the next, which is important to mention in regards of this perception of communities, the Chinese propose to create 3 global communities. One is community with shared interest, community with common responsibilities, and community with shared future. In this sense, community with shared future is one of, let's say, kind of signature concepts used by Xi. And the first time the community with shared future of mankind was introduced by Communist Party co-chairman Hu Jintao in 2012. When it comes to Xi Jinping, he first time he mentions this concept in Moscow in 2013 in March, when he started to speak about this kind of global more role of China in more concrete terms. Then he reminded this in 2017 in Davos in World Economic Forum. And in this sense, of course, he got really important support, or even more support in domestically, but also globally. It was supported by several countries. On another hand, this was one of the kind of stones and the building of not only overall discourse, but also the ways of how China interacts with other countries. Like, for example, I can mention several, let's say, practical statistics. Like, for example, spreading spreading surveillance systems in African countries, etc. So we can mention other examples how this kind of understanding of community with shared future has been spread out on local stages as well as international stages in order to underline the role of China and the kind of responsibility to follow the kind of global ideas offered by Chinese leadership. In order to go further with some other strategic aspects, I would like to mention that our whole view on of Chinese political elite is that they are not building alliances. They are rather looking on several ways of interacting and partnership. And it is important while we are calculating about China's relations with Russia, then we should remember that China sees Russia, first of all, not as an equal partner. Secondly, as a partner, not ally. And while we are calculating about possible kind of cooperation against West, then yes, indeed, China sees Russia as the youngest partner or unequal partner to stand against the West, but especially against the United States, but not really as an ally. And the same goes to other countries. When China is speaking about kind of strategic partnerships, we shouldn't expect that it would mean the same as for kind of Westerner interpretation what strategic partnership meant. Also, we should remember that the main focus for China is still on economic relations and all the ways how those economic relations with other countries, with other trade partners, can support Chinese economic growth. And this kind of peaceful interactions, which are mentioned in the slide first point, basically is really about the ways how China sees its kind of needs, and economic growth here is with particular importance. And there is no wonder, because basically what is this miracle of social contract between Chinese citizens with Communist Party? So basically, the social contract is built on nationalism and on economic gains or economic goods. What the middle class in China gets. I'm not even speaking about the rich ones. So this social contract is strong as long as China has economic growth, or in other words, as long as Chinese Communist Party can offer this economic growth to the society. And that's why China will work, or Chinese Communist Party will work hard in order to provide this economic growth. And in order to provide economic growth, the main interest is to try to escape major military conflicts. So when it comes to the recent changes in foreign policy, we should remember that, as I mentioned, the globalization is being seen as an important aspect, which should be further supported. Because the Communist Party really sees that to be a globalization, it can further develop trade and financial interactions, etc. So in order to provide this economic growth. Then the second point, which I want to mention here about this characteristics of the President Xi foreign policy, is the fact that indeed, Xi is the most important face of China's foreign policy, and let's say Xi is the one who has sharpened relations with other players in the international system, and it really connected with the ways how Xi himself personally see his role not only in China itself but globally. At the same time, already before COVID, what we saw was certain mechanisms of learning how to influence other societies in the world. Like, for example, already before COVID time, Chinese propagandists were learning together or learning from Russian propagandists how to spread propaganda, how to create propaganda, since Chinese propaganda was let's say, less aggressive before. So as a result, during COVID time, we saw already that Chinese propaganda channels use the strategies of Russian propagandists in order to convince about Chinese narratives. Also, what we see in recent years, starting from COVID-19 time, is so-called wolf warrior diplomacy, which demonstrates that taking account the reviewing of China's role in the international system, Chinese diplomats also have become, let's say, more aggressive in their expressions. And here, Europe especially really felt it in this kind of fortnight of COVID-19, when Chinese diplomats were very active in spreading disinformation or spreading hostile narratives against mainly United States, but not only limited to this, also against Europe, NATO, etc., or collective West. So in order to go further, it is important or crucial to mention Belt and Road Initiative, which is in the core of China's relations with Europe, and not only Europe, but other parts of the world. And the Belt and Road Initiative is seen as an instrument to realize China's economic interests, financial interests, and I would say also political interests. And those activities include investments in infrastructure. China starts with kind of neighbors, but we see that within the Belt and Road Initiative, and such investments were made, like, for example, in Greek ports. And now we are questioning what might be situation with Greek ports. We saw it in Chinese interactions with Hungary, when there was even scandal within the European Union about the bribing fact, etc. There were certain pressure from China, while China was interested in Rail Baltica project, but in this sense, Baltic countries stood against Chinese presence, and Chinese so-called investments or loans were not coming in. And in this sense, I think Baltic states have protected themselves from Chinese interests or Chinese hostile activities. So also there are certain discussions on Chinese role in seaports in Netherlands, so in Germany. Let's see how it will develop. In order to go more directly to the kind of topical kind of challenges for the European Union, definitely we should mention China's relations with Russia at the moment, because it's really often questioned what would be China's role in the European security architecture. So what we see is that China continues to support Russia. However, it should not be considered as a full or equal partnership. I already mentioned reasons why, but also what we see is that on one hand, the Chinese leader is traveling to Moscow, is treating Putin as a friend in a way. On another hand, 2 days ago, China was voting in United Nations in order to point that Russia is considered as aggressor in Russia's war in Ukraine. So for this is one of the reasons this kind of activities of China, why there is no consensus on the extent of sea support for Putin's war or Russia's war. But there are many other events and interpretations given by Chinese Communist Party spokesmen in which demonstrate kind of balancing in order to protect the Chinese interests and be on neither Russian side nor Western side. And indeed, economically, the situation is quite good for China because geopolitically, it can block with Russia to push on the West, to challenge Western dominated liberal world order. But on another hand, China is benefiting from cheap resources from Russia, or China is benefiting from kind of Russian urgent need for kind of political support from China. So I believe that although we see European leaders going to China, like for example Macron or von der Leyen last month, going to China and asking for Chinese support, we will not see that China will support directly West or directly Ukraine. On another hand, we will not see China sending weapons to Russia. What we have seen already is that China was sending dual-use equipment, but it is really about balancing, as I said before. When it comes to China's relations with West, we see that China, with its odd values and interests to transatlantic goals in trade, cyberspace, international development, security, and human rights, is creating a serious challenge to transatlantic relations, and not only transatlantic, but indeed to the liberal world order. And China is kind of effectively using its hidden strategies in order to use asymmetric trade, in order to use its influence globally, and to get the dominance in certain regions. So as a result, we can really say that China's approach challenges the unity of US, Canada, and Europe transatlantic relationship. Particular example, what we can really remember from previous months is, like, for example, Macron's expressions in context of relations with United States, etc. Also, we should mention that in this core, one of core characteristics of Chinese approach to West is that China really sees that the United States is the hegemon, which is using other parts of West in order to dominate in the world system. And China sees that this needs to be challenged. And in this sense, also, I should add that China sees West as more aggressive, more individualistic than China would like to see the West. And that's why they say that in this sense, West can be kind of characterized with this so-called father society, which is about individuality, about aggressiveness, about hegemonic strategies. And they say in this sense that themselves are so-called mother society, which is kind of more peaceful. This is official discourse. So if we look on the real policies, then the argument that Chinese people they don't have aggressiveness in their DNS just doesn't work. But overall discourse is indeed based on this. So when it comes to particularly China and European relations, then what we see is that basically we can speak about three main dimensions, big dimensions, the big structure of those relations. The first dimension is trade and investments. Then there is multilateral political cooperation for global governance and peace. And the third one, I would put here people-to-people exchanges. I will later elaborate on this a bit more, how it looks at the moment. But if we talk about, let's say, China's presence in Europe, then we need to speak about Chinese presence in infrastructure. I already mentioned the German ports, Greek ports. We can mention the road system in Hungary, and many other projects which have been associated with as an instrument for realization of certain political pressures by China. Same goes to so-called investments in other parts or other industrial or financial assets. Then we can speak about diplomacy and the ways how Chinese diplomats interact in Europe. Then there is trade as instrument. Like, for example, we saw it with trade chains during COVID time. Then there is Chinese presence in information space and Chinese presence in education, science, culture, like, for example, Confucius Institutes, etc., which we put under the dimension of people-to-people contacts. To give a particular example on Chinese presence, I choose to elaborate a bit more on information threats or Chinese presence in information sphere. And what we see that the recent research made on Chinese presence in the European information space, we see that if we look countries separately, we can observe that there are the approach of China differs from country to country in Europe. So in this sense, European countries can be divided in two groups: countries which are experiencing high intensity of messaging, and countries which are close to no messaging from China directly. In this sense, for example, I can mention Latvia and Estonia, where we really don't see significant information flows directly meant to or targeted to Latvian or Estonian societies. We and as one of let's say more attention to this information threats, Europeans started to pay, especially during COVID time, when indeed China did put focus on disinformation and propaganda campaigns, including the ones which proceeded in European countries. Now what we see in the context of Russia's brutal war in Ukraine is that China's propaganda machine is supporting rather Russian narratives. And in this sense, the topics which are covered is China, United States as a hegemon and the real, let's say, owner of NATO. Then there is European Union is targeted. There is certain information about Russia, which supports Russian propaganda. We even see that Chinese messenger those who produce Chinese messages, they are using Russia's media materials. And then, of course, as you see written here, NATO is also targeted in this context. So in this sense, I would like to also mention the particular research done by China observers in Central and Eastern Europe. And last year, they focused on the ways how Chinese embassies interacted and news agencies interacted in Central and Eastern European countries. And what we saw that at first, in first months after the start of total war in Ukraine, there was certain silence in this kind of China's propaganda machine. But then later on, they indeed, both ambassadors, Chinese ambassadors in European countries, and Chinese media, which were present, really targeted the topics which I already mentioned and supported mainly Russian narratives. When more attention was paid, China also started to create its own narratives to push more its own agenda. And then what we saw was that, like, for example, in Poland, although Chinese propaganda is rather ineffective, what we really saw was, and the research demonstrated it also, that this kind of support to Kremlin's narratives was far more extensive than in other countries. Also, we saw that there was in the kind of trying to blame West and United States and the war in Ukraine, for example, and this kind of Polish information environment. We saw also some other countries with higher presence. In Czech Republic, it was more modest, and then, as I mentioned, like also this research demonstrated that in Baltic states, it's China doesn't pay such attention. But here again, there is no wonder, because China does not see Baltic states as strategically important for their interests. Although we saw extensive, let's say, information attacks against Lithuania, but it was rather about reaction to what Lithuania is doing. Interestingly enough, that after China so hardly attacked Lithuania in international arena, for domestic consumption, China spread the messages that it's nothing important, we shouldn't worry about that, because basically Baltic states are choosing kind of other ways how to cooperate with China, and it's not that big deal. So the attention is really being paid also to how China is communicating not only internationally in order to kind of put pressure on such small challengers as Lithuania, but on another hand, internally, those internal messages demonstrate that China does not pay such a big attention to these issues. So, and of course, important is the issue of people-to-people diplomacy. In this sense, we can mention Confucius Institutes, which are considered officially as the centers of culture. But on the other hand, there are a number of researchers demonstrating that Confucius Institutes are being used by Chinese security services or intelligence. Also, what we see that when it comes to more soft issues like for example, spreading information about culture, history, etc. The very core of Chinese this people-to-people diplomacy was try to tell people more globally about Chinese culture, about Chinese history, about Chinese cuisine, but it was ineffective. As a result, now China has learned a bit, and the strategies have been changed, not dramatically, but still we see that those strategies are being changed. And in this sense, China and people-to-people diplomacy, I would say that is not paying as much as attention to European space as it did before. And now China is considering in this segment other regions as more prioritized over Europe. On Europe, mainly, okay, there are some players with which European players with which China interacts more, like for example Hungary. But on another hand, let's say more pressure is being put on trade relationships with Europe. So I would like to also, according to the logic of these dimensions of interactions, I would like to show this expert survey results. This expert survey was done by China observers in Central and Eastern Europe, and altogether in this research, 171 China observers were involved, and they were asked to elaborate more on the future of China and the EU relations. And basically what we see from this slide is those sensitive issues where experts and policymakers are sensitive or very careful about China's possible influence in Europe. So what we see is a group of experts was kind of divided in three parts. One were real experts, so researchers. The second part was European Swanji group of young researchers who are rather sympathetic to China. And in this sense, we see the differences in their views. And the European Parliamentary Research Service people also were involved. So you see three different answers. So, and this slide directly shows what we are really careful about. The first one is that this community underlines the need to seek more reciprocity in relations, especially trade relations with China. And this actually was what President Macron was trying to do while visiting China last month, and what von der Leyen was trying to underline also, that the reciprocity should be somehow solved. At the moment, all what we see is that that there is no reciprocity, that European Union does not have access to the Chinese market, including trade and investments. And what we see is that there are several barriers made by China's politicians in order to kind of not allow European companies to come in China. So those European companies which are operating in China are facing several challenges. and operating in Chinese market is not easy at all. When it comes to trade also, what is important to mention here is that European Union, especially in context of challenges faced during COVID time, the Chinese, Europeans are underlining that there should be mitigation of dependencies on Chinese products in order to escape the potential risks of Chinese influence, political influence, trade influence, economic influence, and other types of influence, which this dependency is creating through kind of vulnerability, because this dependency obviously is vulnerability of euro. What means this kind of rebalancing trade chains? It is about not fully decoupling from China. And that's why exactly last month, Ursula von der Leyen also mentioned that we are not about decoupling with China, which would mean not trading with China at all. What the message which Ursula von der Leyen was trying to send was that we need to work with the risking, what means that we continue to cooperate with China, but we see also other trade partners. We see the challenges of this kind of lack of reciprocity, and that's why we are trying to protect ourselves in the dimensions which are important in this kind of interaction. When it comes to investments, of course, the risks which are identified by European Union are connected with political pressures made by Chinese Communist Party, and also corruption risks and other similar risks, which in developed democracies are seen as a serious threats, and that's why seen as those challenges which have to be mitigated. Then also we see that the protecting intellectual property is mentioned here, and indeed Europe sees as an important challenge in context with cooperation with China. So there are two dimensions. One is connected with interaction between researchers and the way how intellectual property of researchers is being protected. Recently, what we see when universities, European universities are getting more careful in cooperation with China, because of sharing with data and the ways how Chinese intelligence can use data shared by European researchers. So what China is doing, China now is making point on more supporting individual researchers in order to still to kind of react to change of universities' policies, and still to get data or to get intellectual property. Another dimension where this intellectual property issue is arising is the way how China interacts with Western companies, including European companies. Like, for example, if a European company is entering Chinese markets, so according to Chinese legal system, company has to share its intellectual property with Chinese state, which obviously creates certain threats to the owners of this intellectual property, so those European firms or United or Western firms in general. So when it comes to disinformation space, so one of the huge discussions in Europe is not only the narratives, which I mentioned already in context of information threats, but also European Union is has discussion on European media market, how open it is to Chinese big companies. And here Europeans are very careful, again, with Chinese investments in the European media market, because of course it creates certain risks on this type of ownership, on the ways how European media market will develop. So cultural and educational exchange, I already elaborated on this. Connectivity and infrastructure was mentioned as well. Then there is the issue of security cooperation, which was not mentioned yet. So, and indeed, I need to underline it separately because security is becoming, let's say, hotly debated issue in EU-China relations. And one, of course, is Ukraine and China's role in finding kind of peaceful way out of Russia's war in Ukraine. But another part, of course, is South China Sea. And for Europe, South China Sea has particular importance, taking account that 40% of EU foreign trade passes exactly South China Sea. And that's why we see that European countries are extremely careful about what is happening in South China Sea. That's why we see such countries as France, Germany, Netherlands trying to interact in order to escape conflict in Taiwan or Chinese attack on Taiwan, and trying to convince China not to start the war against Taiwan. On another hand, I don't think that China will do that in short term. But still, indeed, the European Union is very, very careful about that. And the final point here is human rights issue, where European Union as normative power still reminds that human rights is the value which European Union protects. And China is challenging this value not only with Uyghurs in its own land, but also by supporting non-democratic regimes globally and supporting regimes which are violating human rights. So these are those dimensions where European Union experts really see threats from Chinese side, and they invite to be careful, because those threats are also threats for European political stability, European economic sustainability, and also for core European values, which are democratic values. So in the conclusion, I would like to mention, so what should be done? So what we see is that first of all, European challenges Europe is facing, or problems European is facing are quite a lot connected with internal issues, like, for example, populism, identity crisis or identity activist movements, the kind of hostile activities also from external actors which are supporting internal destabilization. And in this sense, Europe really needs to solve internal challenges and to rely on democratic values. Another example which I just have to mention here is the kind of democratic backslide within European Union itself, which is of course sympathetic for such regimes as Chinese regime or Russian regime. We can mention here Hungary. Interesting enough is the situation with Poland, which has democratic backsliding, but now in context of Russia's brutal war in Ukraine, we are not underlining Poland's issue that much, because the Poland is the main supporter of Ukraine. So, but it doesn't mean that this issue will be always for always silent, and we really need to remember that European Union needs to do something with reminding Poland about democratic values and following the democratic values, which is in the core of European Union. So also we should remember that democracy and democracy in Europe is based on several pillars. The one which is pillar of liberal democracy, and in this sense, in a from very pragmatic perspective, liberal democracy is the not the best but the most effective tool and the best of the worst tools, how to provide human rights, how to protect society's economic, social, cultural, and religious diversity. And although there are several groups which are making pressure on this kind of core standpoints of liberal democracy, we should remember that it is one pillar which we should stand for. The second pillar in this context is connected with morals, with human rights, with citizen rights, which are protected by European legislation in order to protect people from too big interruption in personal affairs by state, or violations of human rights, and on kind of violations on individual autonomy. This is about morals. So first was governance of liberal democracy, the second was morals of liberal democracy, and third one is the economic pillar, and it is connected with the fact that democracy as such helps us to maintain overall situation in countries more, let's say, more friendly to ordinary citizens, and that differences between different layers of society can be diminished by different tools democracies has. And this is about those internal pillars, which are important when we think about external pressures from China. And also, when we turn to international arena, we should remember that EU as a normative power should become more influential player in international arena, and stand against Chinese challenge to liberal world order. In this sense, Europe has even moral obligation to stand for human rights, to stand for principle of sovereignty, to stand for other core principles of global order, liberal global order. And then, of course, Europe should do more investments in innovations, since we see that China has turned from the one who is just copying to the world's almost top one innovator, and in this sense, Europe is only third after the United States. So, in order to protect development and protect itself from external influence, there should be far more investment in this, and of course, more attention should be paid on on where China is investing, under what circumstances, and what are the obligations European partners are taking, while kind of agreeing with China in investments or in trade. And as a final point, I would like to mention that Europe should really pay attention to real implementation of statements done or plans addressed or posted by European Union leadership, like for example the one which I mentioned, this positions taken by Ursula von der Leyen, that Europe should de-risk to do de-risking in relations with China. So there should be real de-risking, not only the will to do so, but real policies which will guarantee that this de-risking policies will be implemented. Yeah, those are the main points which I wanted to mention here today. Here I will stop the record of the lecture, and we can have Q&A discussion already without record. Thank you very much for your attention, and I am open to questions. Now